So I'm going to walk between King's Cross and Waterloo and see how many bookshops I can get to. A while back, fellow booktuber MJ from This Reading Life went on a bookshop tour of Philadephia. She mentioned that she would really like to do a bookshop tour of somewhere like London. Now, as I live in London and go to bookshops occasionally, I thought I might try to put together a little map. So I did, on Google Earth. Once I put all my books on Google Earth, I did notice there's kind of a straight line between King's Cross and Waterloo where there are a lot of bookshops. So I thought, why don't I walk that, see how long it takes, and see if I can visit all those bookshops in a reasonable amount of time. There are 23 bookshops in this book walk, although if you don't want to have long walks between bookshops, you can kind of cut off some of the shops at the beginning and at the end, and you'll have something a little bit shorter and more compact, where you only have a few minutes between each bookshop. So, where do we start? King's Cross and Word on the Water. The London Book Barge. This bookshop is a 100-year-old Dutch barge sitting in the Regent's Canal just off Granary Square, north of King's Cross Station. It seems to be a very pleasant bookshop, but there is a slight feeling that people go there to be seen to go there rather than actually go there to buy books. And unfortunately, when I turned up, I was about an hour too early to actually shop in it. I'll have to go back there another time. My next journey was to go along York Road, down the side of King's Cross Station, and then turn off to get myself to the Caledonian Road and visit Housemans Bookshop. Housemans Bookshop is a non-profit bookshop specialising in progressive and radical books and pamphlets and leaflets. We cross the busy street outside King's Cross Station, past the old Scala Cinema and into the Gray's Inn Road. We are heading to Collins and Clark. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you may notice that Collins and Clark looks vaguely familiar. It was used as the exterior for a British comedy series called Black Books, all about a rather antisocial book dealer. From the reviews I get on Collins and Clark, the people inside the shop are fairly friendly and knowledgeable. It is an antiquarian bookshop, so what you're looking for what appear on the outside as dusty old hardbacks. Now, I have to admit that my book buying taste is more in the line of second-hand fiction paperbacks. So while this doesn't have an awful lot of interest to me, it's a very interesting and worthwhile shop to look at. One of the things you can get from Collins and Clark is a Collins and Clark tote bag. In fact, you can also get tote bags from Housemans Bookshop and the Word on the Water. In fact, if you were to collect tote bags from every shop that you could along this walk, I think you'd get about a dozen, which is quite a good haul. But do you need that many tote bags? It's rather like asking, do you need that many books? The answer might just be yes. Just around the corner from Collins and Clark is Jud Books. Jud Books specialises in art books, but also has a very good selection of fiction paperbacks. And it turns out that this was the only shop where I actually bought a book on this whole walk. I was tempted in other places, but yeah, I only succumbed at Jud Books. Just along the road from Jud Books, along Marchmont Street, is Gaze the Word. Gaze the Word has been in this place since 1979. You might recognise it if you've seen the film Pride, about a gay and lesbian group from London who basically help out miners during the miners' strike in the 1980s. And there is indeed a plaque for some of the activists who set up their offices above this bookshop. Gaze the Word concentrates very much on LGBTQIA literature, and it's a very good source for books of that sort. Yet just a little bit further down Marchmont Street and slightly off to the side, under the Brunswick Centre, we get Scoob Books. Now, along this route, there are probably three of my favourite bookshops in London, and Scoob Books is definitely one of those three. It is a second-hand bookshop, and they have an extensive collection of second-hand books, possibly the best selection in the whole of London, certainly the whole of central London. More often than not, when I'm looking for books by a particular author, I will find them at Scoob Books, even if I don't find the particular book that I'm after. But you should be warned, Scoob Books do know their books and they know their value. You should always pay attention to the little price that they have written in the front of the book in pencil, because it can be rather steep, and I've been caught out once or twice and ended up paying 3 times the normal amount for a book. It was only slightly more expensive than it would have been sort of online, but it's still a bit of a surprise if you're not paying attention. From Scoob Books we have a little bit of a long walk to our next destination. We go past Russell Square Station, which would be a good starting point if you just want to do the very central London aspects of this book walk. You start at Russell Square Station, do the 4 bookshops nearby, and then walk to our next destination. Down through the park in Russell Square, down past the side of the British Museum and into Bury Place, where we have the London Review Bookshop. This bookshop is probably our first general bookshop on this walk. It has a wide selection of the kind of new books that you would expect to see in most sort of regular bookstores. I didn't find any real specialism here other than newer books and the sort of popular abiding classics that you might find. But it's still a very, very pleasant bookshop. We then nip round the corner, down a street where they haven't collected the bins for a while, and into Museum Street, where we find the Atlantis Bookshop, a bookshop that specialises in the occult and the living history of magic. We then turn back up Museum Street towards the British Museum, where we confront the closed door of Jandice Antiquarian Booksellers. They are antiquarian booksellers that specialise in 17th, 18th and especially 19th century literature. I have to say, I've never seen anybody go in and out of Jandice. I've never seen the doors open or a sign saying we are open for business. It does feel as if you have to go there by special invitation. But from their website they do seem to have some very nice interiors and a very nice sort of an old 19th century library charm to them. We head off around the corner to my second favourite bookshop on this London bookshop walk. That is Oxfam's Bloomsbury Bookshop. It's kind of their flagship bookshop in London. Now, Oxfam is a charity. Oxfam is short for Oxford Famine Relief. They do seem to do good work, so you don't hear too many bad stories about them, which you do about some charities. And they have charity or goodwill stores pretty much in every town in the country, and some of their stores are specifically for books. This bookshop has a very good selection of books. I can always find interesting things and things that I want to buy. One of the things that makes a bookshop a favourite of mine is luck. Going into a bookshop and making lucky finds. Finding things that you did want and finding things that you didn't realise you wanted. And the Bloomsbury Oxfam Bookshop is certainly one of those. After that, we nip across the road to Bookmarks, the London Socialist Bookshop. It is a very, very left-wing bookshop, and although everybody is very friendly in the bookshop, I do sometimes feel that I really ought to learn the International so that I can quote it to them as I buy books. But as I say, it's a good bookshop, but it is very, very specialist and very, very about socialism and left-wing politics. In making this, I realised that bookmarks might be something of a pun. Book Marks, as in Carl. And now we're going to head to another place which might also be a pun. And we're going to head down Shaftesbury Avenue and the Forbidden Planet London Megastore. The Forbidden Planet is a sort of general sci-fi fantasy films shop. Lots of souvenirs, lots of collectibles, lots of action figures. But in the basement they have a very large selection of books. Again, mostly sci-fi, mostly fantasy, a little bit of filmmaking, but also comics, graphic novels and manga. I did linger rather a long time in here because I found it really rather interesting. Now we're headed down to what was once possibly the largest bookshop in London. Before I get there, but it's worth stopping briefly outside this McDonald's, not because I have a great desire for a Big Mac, but because this is on the site of 84 Charing Cross Road, which you might know from a book by Helen Hanff and a film starring Anne Bancroft and Anthony Hopkins. Like so many other bookshops in Charing Cross Road, this bookshop has now closed. In the 1990s, there were still about a dozen bookshops along the Charing Cross Road. Now I think there are only 3, and we're heading towards one, Foyles. It used to be said that if it was in print, it was in foils. This iteration of Foyles is fairly new. They moved from their previous site just up the road and into the site of the Central St Martin's School of Art. So this version of Foyles is a little eccentric in its flooring, with sort of one floor, the next floor up being only half a floor above the previous floor. 30 years ago in their huge and labyrinthine shop, you would spend ages looking for a book. It wasn't helped by the fact that although they had books stored in general subject areas, they then decided that they would store the books according to publisher. So you kind of needed to know the name of the publisher of a book if you wanted any chance of finding it. The other eccentricity of the old Foyles was that you would take your purchases to the counter. They would write you a little note or chit, and you would take that chit to a cash desk where you would pay your money. You then take the stamped piece of paper or chit back and collect your books. It's actually a rather odd way of doing things, but it is the way they used to do things in Russian Berioska shops. Back out of Foyles, we're going to head down the Charing Cross Road towards the 2 last remaining second-hand bookshops on Charing Cross Road. There used to be a lot more second-hand bookshops along here, but these are the 2 survivors. The first we get to is Henry Pord's Books. It's a nice shop, a bit of a speciality in art books, also second-hand and antiquarian books. It is rather more hardback than paperback, but they did have a few interesting books on display when I went in. Unfortunately, part of the shop was closed, so I wasn't able to linger too long in there. Next, a little way down the street, we get to the 3rd of my favourite bookshops on this walk. Any Amount of Books. It's a small bookshop, but as I said, one of the things that makes me value a bookshop is luck. And I've always been fairly lucky in this bookshop at finding what I want, and even finding things that I didn't know I wanted. They have a bin of cheap books outside. They're, I think, £1.50 these days. And they have a nice fiction selection just inside the door. And they also have a basement with a lot of bargain books down below. One of the things I like about this bookshop is that we are in the middle of Theatreland. We're within 10 minutes walk of about 14 theatres. Now I go to a lot of theatre, and this bookshop has often been on my way to those theatres, and if I had a little bit of time, I'd always pop in here and maybe come out having just bought a book. Our next stop is Ciel Court, which is a narrow pedestrian street or alley between Charing Cross Road and St Martin's Lane. There are probably 6 or 7 bookshops on this street, but I'm only going to talk about 4 of them. Our first stop is Goldsborough Books, which likes to specialise in signed first editions of books. Indeed, they sometimes hold book launches. Our next stop is Watkins Books, which has a 130-year history of selling esoterica, as well as science fiction and fantasy. Almost opposite Watkins Books is Marchpane. They specialise in children's and illustrated books, and they have a particular fondness for Alice in Wonderland. The last bookshop I'll talk about in Ciel Court is Tindley and Everett. This bookshop doesn't look like too much on the outside, but it does apparently have a basement which is stacked with first editions of 20th century books. Moving on from Ciel Court, we walk down past St Martin's Church and past Trafalgar Square, and come to the only Waterstones on our journey. Waterstones is the biggest and possibly the only major bookshop chain in London. And this shop is not their largest one or their premier one in London, but it is a fairly large one going across 3 floors. And it's a very pleasant general bookshop. If you take the advice of mapping software, it'll tell you to head down Northumberland Avenue, cross underneath Hungerford Bridge, and then go up some steps to get the pedestrian walkway across the Thames. Actually, the best way to do things is to go through Charing Cross Station and go down a corridor to get to the same pedestrian bridge, which I should say is called the Golden Jubilee Bridge. It is actually 2 bridges on either side of the Hungerford Rail Bridge, and both of them afford very nice views of London on the River Thames. Coming off the Golden Jubilee Bridge, we get to Foyles at the Royal Festival Hall. This is a small branch of Foyles and is a very pleasant place, but not quite so comprehensive as the main store in Charing Cross Road. From Foyles we head along the South Bank down towards Waterloo Bridge and the National Theatre. Here we find the South Bank Book Market. The book market is about half a dozen long trestle tables filled with books, second-hand books, but also things like art prints. If any particular books predominate, it does seem to be second-hand Harry Potter books and various parts of John Galsworthy's Forsyte saga. But this is a great place to visit and browse. You should of course be aware that these people are book dealers. They know the price of books and they know what they can charge in this market. So you're not necessarily going to get any bargains. Although back in the day I got a complete set of the Palliser novels for a very reasonable price. Now this could of course conclude our book walk. We've gone to an awful lot of places and you may wish to stop here. But if you're willing to walk another 10 minutes or so, down past Waterloo Station, towards the Old Vic, and then towards the Young Vic in the Cut, you will come to the Calder Bookshop and Theatre. The Calder Bookshop specialises in theatre books, books about theatre and plays, both new and second-hand. So that's my bookshop walk between King's Cross and Waterloo. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please let me know if you ever want to go on it. There are links in the description to both my Google Earth map of all the bookshops I know of in London. I'm always updating that. There's also a link to a copy of this bookshop walk on a map. It's built on OpenStreetMap, so I hope it's okay to let you sort of download and print out the map for yourselves. Also, you might want to keep an eye on my community tab, where I'll post any updates that might be necessary for this bookshop walk. Goodbye.